Hello, everybody. Hope everybody is surviving going online. We're going to now be continuing our lectures online just like I would do in class. So this week we're going to be doing Chapter 12, Work, Occupational and Lifestyle Issues in Young and Middle Adulthood. We've learned about the adolescent and teenager. Now let's see what their lifestyle is as they go into the work and lifestyle choices. So in this chapter, we'll be exploring what factors are attributed to job satisfaction. What difficulties do middle-aged people face when they need to switch careers? How do men and women differ regarding career choice? How do parents juggle work and caring for children? We're also going to be looking at occupational selection and development. How do people view work? How do people choose their occupations? What factors influence occupational development? What is the relationship between job satisfaction and age? Do you like your job more when you're younger or when you're older? Many factors influence how we choose work, right? Just like how we went over earlier about how our personalities and our identities help us choose which type of work we want to do. First, work should be appealing, right? We should like it. Often a source for friends. What was our source for friends in high school? It was a group of friends that we were together, right? That social atmosphere helped us choose our friends. Work is very similar. We're in a different type of atmosphere, work. What kind of friendships do we develop when we're doing the same type of job? What does the dynamic look like when your friends are with people who share your work, right? We begin to arrange personal activities around our work schedules. Parents often choose childcare centers on the basis of proximity to where they work. What is important for you when you're deciding on your career and work goals? Have you thought about these issues? Let's explore. We're now going to be covering the meaning of work, part 1. Most people view work as a means for obtaining money and personal growth. What do you feel is more important, money or personal growth? Doing something that will make you financially secure, or doing what you love, or can you have both? Would you be able to stay in a job if you made lots of money, but yet it was not fulfilling? I can tell you honestly, I've had jobs where I made a lot of money, but the work was so excruciating and fulfilling that I did not last in it. Until I experienced that, I never thought I would make that decision. So it's definitely a balance. I definitely wouldn't want a job that I couldn't afford to live, but I also wouldn't want a job where I was miserable every day. What do you guys think? According to Turkle in his book, his view on working is: work is a search for daily meaning, as well as daily bread, for recognition as well as cash, for astonishment rather than torpor. In short, for sort of life rather than a Monday through Friday sort of dying. Do you agree with this? Do you work to live or live to work? Does work encompass your whole life? Or can you strike that balance of work-life balance? What they found is that personal achievement is fulfilled through work based on whether or not you can find meaning, and can you achieve that. So what they found were 4 areas of meaning. It's that, can you find meaning in developing yourself? Do you have a union with other people? Are you making those relationships, those friends that tie you to your job? Are you able to express yourself? Or does your work limit who you are or your opinions? Does your opinions not matter? Do you have input into the say how your work goes? And are you able to serve others and help fellow employer, your fellow employees, your workmates, or other people? So most of us in this class are wanting to be nurses or some kind of healthcare field or something that where we help people. If that's important to you, are you getting that fulfillment back? The research also goes on to say that these meanings help determine the work behavior. To the extent where people experience these meanings will determine if work is an area of personal fulfillment. So if they're not getting these 4 meanings met, they're probably not getting fulfillment in their work. The second part we're going to go over for the meaning of work is the mission of your company. Do your ideals fit with what your company's ideals? A meaning mission fit is the alignment between an executive's personal intentions and the company's mission. When aligned, executives care about employees' happiness, job satisfaction, and emotional well-being. Do you think you would have more satisfaction and develop better meaning in your work with this model? Right? If your employer, your CEO actually cared about how you viewed the job, if you were happy in the job and your emotional well-being, right? That's the kind of company you'd want to work for that has your needs as well as the company's needs in mind. We're now going to go on to occupational choice revisited. Today's landscape of career choices is vastly different than our parents. Today, we now view careers as something people construct themselves, opposed to entering a career. Can you think of some self-made careers? How many YouTube personalities do we have? Selling from home. It's a totally different culture. Careers are unlimited now, right? Let's revisit some of the things we learned in Chapter 9. Remember Holland with his personality and Super with his identity? We're going to kind of revisit that and go over 3 theories on adults' choice of work. The first one is career construction theory. So people build careers through own actions that result from personal characteristics and the social context. So in the career construction theory, it posts that people build careers through their own actions, right? As a result from their interface with their personal characteristics and their social context. So what they do in the world of work results from how they are able to adapt to their environment. So a lot of things play into that, right? So we remember way back in Chapter 1, the results of our biopsychosocial process, right? Grounded in one's life experience. So everything that person's experienced, from their personality, from their genetics, from the influences of society and the environment, will construct how they want to choose their career. So it's based on the way that we have developed. So all the development that we've learned so far in class is going to help form that career. And that's the career construction theory. It's based on a lot of the theories that we've already learned, that biopsychosocial theory, and how that constructs us into interacting with our environment and who we are, and helps us choose our career. The second one is Holland, which we learned in Chapter 9. And again, remember him. He was the one that based it on personality type. So his personality type theory, people choose work based on the fit between their individual traits and occupational interests. So remember, he categorizes occupations by interpersonal settings in which people must function and by their associated lifestyles. As you recall, there were 6 personality types that combine these factors. They investigate social, realistic, artistic, conventional, and enterprising. And they can be a mixture of some, and they're optimally related to occupation. So the stronger your personality is in one, the more likely to have certain types of occupations. And then the last one is the social cognitive career theory, SCCT. And it's based on career choices as a result of the application of Bandura's social cognitive theory, especially self-efficacy. SCCT proposes that people's career choices are heavily influenced by their interests. What do you guys think? Do you follow one of these molds more than the other, or are you a mixture? Have you ever even thought of it like this? Think about what career you're choosing right now. Does it fit any of these constructs? So here is a 4-variable path of what we just talked about, the occupational choice revisited. So you can kind of see it looks kind of confusing. How do we choose what we're going to be for our occupation? So the simplest view is includes the 4 main factors. So you can see that self-efficacy is, and that's their belief in your own ability. So if you have their belief in your own ability, you can go directly to your outcome expectations, and that's what you think will happen in a specific situation. So I believe in what I want to do. I'm going to go and try out and do that career. I'm going to have an expectation what I'm going to have is going for that career. You can also see it goes to interest, and of course that's what you like, and choice goals, what you want to achieve. So if you put all 4 of those factors together, your belief in your own ability, your interest, so I believe I can do this, I'm interested in this field, I'm going to set goals to graduate, get my license. I'm going to maybe be a nurse. And those are going to be my outcomes. So that's kind of how I'm going to choose my career path. And that's the simple form. It actually has a more complex if you look at the other lines, which includes supports, the environmental things that help you. So your parents, the schools, all that support systems, and the barriers, environmental things that block or frustrate you, lack of resources, impacted programs, right? Things that would derail your outcomes. So if you have the simplistic words with those four main factors, self-efficacy, outcomes, interest, and choice goals, and then the more complex things. So if you think about, we all deal with that, right? We've all had to deal with those hurdles and those goals, but if we have a clear path like this, you're more likely to achieve your outcome because you're knowing what your interests are, you're focused, and you have specific goals to reach that. So although people have underlying tendencies that relate to certain types of occupation, unless they see success in those occupations and careers, they probably won't choose them, right? Beliefs are definitely influenced by external forces, right? Your parental approval. How many times do we go in doing something that our parents want, but we really don't, and then end up changing our mind? Career prestige. Am I going to choose to be a career goal as a cashier, or maybe I want to be a manager, right? The prestige of it. What do other people think of it? Money, location, hours, they all factor in. What type of job do you want? What would be your dream job if you could choose the hours and the location and the money, right? And then what's the reality? Can you get close to that? So this helps you on that path to that success. Now that we've gone over the pathway of choosing your occupation, we're going to go over a little bit occupational development. As adulthood, right, we're always trying to find the right fit in involving to achieve our occupational goals, right? We're always monitoring our progress toward it, it's changing or even abandoning those goals, right, when they don't fit our current outlook. There was one time I wanted to be a lawyer, right? But I became a physical therapist. I abandoned that. What factors into you choosing the career path that you're finally going to stick with? Will you stick with it for the rest of your life? How many people are on their second, third career, right? Job changes, occupational development changes for very many different circumstances. They found that personal experience affects people's occupational goals, right? So if your experiences change, your goals might change. Could be due to finances, having children. You may not be able to do the same job you were doing before. Many, many different factors. You may have a disability. You might got hurt on the job, right? So goals may change due to changing interests, not having a good fit with the job, or the need for further education to advance. They found that, though, people with talent and opportunity to achieve their goals often obtain them. So if you have a real talent and you're connected to the resources to obtain that talent, you're most likely to be successful. Research shows that when high school students who were identified as being academically talented were asked about their career expectations and outcomes, they were surprisingly accurate 10 and 20 years later. This just shows us that if we put the resources behind people with talent, we're going to see successful people in jobs. Young adults usually modify career expectations at least once. I know I did. You probably already have, or may in the future, depending on your success or your interest changing and getting into the selected career right now. The biggest change that they found is in women's occupational and career expectations. There's so many more opportunities for women, but what are some of the struggles still, right? Think about what it was like 50 years ago to now. So much more improvement, but yet so much still to be gained. So now let's think about different generations and occupational development. What is the differences between 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 50 years ago? What does the workforce today look like? So what they found is that millennials tend to change jobs more often than in other generations. However, they generally have the same level of satisfaction. Think back to your parents and grandparents. How many jobs or careers did they have? Did they spend their entire life in one career? I know my father did. He was a firefighter for 30 years. Is that the reality now? Or are most people going to have for one job, second job, a third career? Now think of today's generation. Do you expect to stay in the same career your entire life? Or is this a stepping stone? Or are you open to changing it, to going back to school, to learning new skills? Millennials are more likely to view traditional organizations with more distrust and cynicism, but are no more egotistical and are just as happy as were young adults in every generation from the 1970s. So even though they have a different view on occupational development, they're just as happy in their jobs. Millennials have an inherent mistrust in organizations. They prefer culture focused on employee development, creating information through interactive social media. They're more globally aware and more comfortable with working with people from diverse socio-ethnic backgrounds. And they do best in situations that value innovation through teamwork. What are your guys' experiences? The young generation, millennials, have been raised in technology. It's totally different than from 20, 30 years ago. Interaction is different. They've been taught differently. They may view things differently than your boss. How does that affect your occupational development? For me personally, I found that the new generation of workers in my field of physical therapy are coming out demanding higher pay, but expecting greater help with development. So they're asking for more pay without having the skills yet. When I got hired 20 years ago, that would never have happened. You're paid on your level of expertise, your knowledge. Why do you think that's happening? Do you feel that the younger generation has more access to knowledge and a better understanding of their career goals, along with that mistrust of organizations, so they don't necessarily trust or agree that work has their best interests? Are they taught to be more aggressive, to speak up for their value, for their worth? Something to think about. How do you approach your job? How would you go in and negotiate for a salary? What would you look at prior to going in for that? What do you think your employer's views will be if they're from a different generation? I have had many clinical students with more transitioning knowledge into critical thinking and reasoning, and real life application is a necessary skill. No personal situation is the same. You need to learn to use your knowledge to make clinical decisions for each individual patient client. All those students entering the healthcare workforce will be accepted to apply this to past clinicals, and others will have to show this skill to advance in their jobs, right? So a reality shock is what is learned in the classroom does not carry over to the real world and does not represent all a person needs to know. So you need to best address your internships and practicum, right? So physical therapy, nursing, rad tech, other healthcare fields have built-in internships, right? Those clinical students I was talking about, that allows them to learn from a mentor, allows them to gain the experience in a safe environment. Because when they come in, that knowledge is definitely not real world applicable. People are vary from patient to patient, person to person. These skills come with experience, and with that experience, you get paid more. Something to think about. So thinking about that mentor, executive coach relationship and why that's so important for new employees, right? That occupational development, especially in the healthcare field where lives are mattered, or in any field, right? You need someone that's a part teacher, part sponsor, a part model. You want to see that behavior that you should be modeling, and part counselor who facilitates on-the-job learning for present and future work. You want to have a good mentor that's going to tell you not only the job and the skills that you need, but the ins and outs of the actual workplace environment, the workplace relationships, right? So mentors help proteges receive credit where credit is due, right? They don't take their credit, but they are helping them achieve higher status and praising them when they get it. High quality relationships can lead to occupational success, and mentors practice leadership skills and a sense of generativity from the relationship. So what does that all mean? So want to think of some of the learning methods, right? So when you're having a mentor relationship, think of the scaffolding that we learned earlier, right? That how we grade help. So first of all, when you're first in a mentor relationship or an internship or that type of relationship, you're going to have more hands-on initially. Then it's going to progress to students' independence, right? And then eventually students who can will be successful on their own. And students, or actually not even students now, if you're an employer, who can't do that won't succeed, right? So there's going to be that relationship, that scaffolding process, right? Going to need a lot more help at the beginning, and then the goal is to get that help to decrease till you're on your own. And if you can't, you're probably not going to be successful or have maybe not even be able to continue on your job. And most jobs have probationary periods, so something to think about. It helps provide the unwritten rules, right, to survive in the environment. How many of you have been in a job where on paper, oh yeah, I can do the job, but until you speak to someone who works there and knows the ins and out of the office or the environment that you're in the workplace dynamic, do you really succeed? And if you don't have this inside knowledge, you can really set yourself up for failure. And on the other side, what do mentors get out of this? Mentors get satisfaction of helping a younger employee learn that job, which is one of Erickson's phases of development, and that's that generativity that happens in middle adulthood, which we'll cover more in chapter 13. But basically, it reflects the needs of the middle-aged adult, and that is that they ensure the continuity of society through activities such as socialization or having children. So they're passing on their skills onto you so that it continues for generations to come. And this mentor relationship also produces transformation leaderships for mentors. So it allows them to advance their own careers. By mentoring you, they're building leadership skills, training skills that will help them change the direction of the organization and actually even promote up. And hopefully one day you will in turn be the mentor. So by doing this, you're going to allow to lead successful teams that move up to leadership, that promote positive work attitudes and career expectations to follow. And so that if everybody has that good relationship, then your team will be successful and your job satisfaction will be good as well. So women and minorities also particularly benefit from having a mentor, right? It creates higher expectations. It gives them greater support to succeed in careers that maybe women and minorities haven't traditionally been in. And the cultural background of the employees should be incorporated into this relationship so that they succeed, right? So if they know in the cultural background of what's going to make them the best employee, they should include this in that mentor relationship. Higher expectations and better perceived career development, as well as increased retention of diverse employees, allows these women and minority mentorship relationships to succeed. It's critical to adopt culturally conscious models of mentoring to enhance the advantages of mentoring for minorities. It's a means to understand how an organization's culture affects employees and building those assumptions and behaviors into the mentoring situation so that they're including not just men, not just one ethnicity, that they're including everybody and that the culture supports all cultures. One possible downfall of mentors, and maybe you guys have experienced this, I have, is having a poor mentor is almost worse than having no mentor. So remember this, having a poor mentor is worse than having no mentor. So carefully matching a mentor to a protege is necessary. Have you ever had a mentor, good or bad? I've had both. And when they were bad, it really derailed my learning. It caused anxiety. It did not further my career aspirations. I lost a lot of hands-on knowledge. And I will agree that having a bad mentor is worse than having no mentor at all. I probably would have been better off just observing and learning on my own. So it's very important that if you're noticing that you don't have a good fit in these jobs, that you speak up and find someone, because statistics and research shows that mentoring process is key to being successful. We're now going to move on to job satisfaction. What is job satisfaction? It's that positive feeling, right, that you results from the appraisal of one's work. Someone telling you you're doing a good job. Research indicates that job satisfaction is multifaceted, but that certain characteristics, including hope, resilience, optimism, and self-efficacy, help predict both job performance and job satisfaction, right? If you're having hope, resilience, optimism in your job, you're going to probably be happy. And you're probably going to do better if you're happy. The research goes on to say that creation of the psychological capital theory, the notion that having a positive outlook improves processes on outcome. Satisfaction with some aspect of one's jobs tends to increase gradually with age, and successful aging includes workplace competency, right? So if you're successfully aging, you're happy, get good relationships at home, your physical health is well, it's going to carry over into your job. If you have a lot of home stress, you're physically ill, you're probably going to carry over that as well into your job and may not be happy. Also, if you have a positive outlook, you're more likely to have positive things happen to you, right? If you're negatively and always thinking of the what could happen, what ifs, all the miserable things in your life, you're probably not going to be happy in your job. All that can play back and forth. It also goes on to say that generally it increases with age for white collar professionals. Why is that so? Maybe because they make more money. They have an easier physical job, and maybe they have more input into actually what their job entails. They found that blue collar professionals generally do not have higher job satisfaction as they age. And this is with both men and women. It also varies across cultures. A study of Filipino and Taiwanese workers in the long-term healthcare industry in Taiwan showed that workers with 4 or 5 years of experience had lower job satisfaction. Why is that so? What is the environment that they work in that would cause that? From my personal experience, I work with many physical therapists that are originally from the Philippines, and I do know that they've told me that it's very difficult to find paying jobs in physical therapy. A lot of it is volunteer or very low wages. So after about 4 or 5 years, could you imagine trying to support your family on that? You wouldn't have very much job satisfaction, right? So a lot of things contribute to that. Accumulation of experience. The more experience you have, the easier your job is, right? If the easier your job is, the happier, the more successful you'll be. What stage of career development are you in? Are you just learning, or have you kind of got up to where you're mentoring now? That can definitely contribute to your job satisfaction. If you're struggling a lot in the early, or you're in a critical time in promotion, it can relate to that job satisfaction. And the flexibility to meet family responsibilities. Your job if you've got your job in your 20s and now you're in your late 30s, early 40s, your development is different, right? We learn you have different needs. Maybe you're single when you started, and now you have a family and children. Flexibility, time off, childcare, all those things are going to be more important, maybe so than income. So those all contribute to job satisfaction. Does it make your life easier, that life job work balance? On the flip side of job satisfaction is alienation. So what happens if you're not satisfied in your job? What are some things that would cause this to happen? Alienation. When workers feel that what they are doing is meaningless and efforts are devalued. So if job satisfaction is that positive reinforcement, if you're feeling alienated, your boss is definitely not giving you those positive reinforcements. They may even not even recognize the contributions you make to your job. You may feel like it's meaningless, that you have no value. You alienate yourself from your fellow coworkers. It also can refer to the connection between what you do and your final product. So if you don't feel that connection, you're going to feel alienated and you're going to have less job satisfaction. Positive work environments provide stability and commitment. So you need to have that trust between employees and employer, right? If you're always worried about, does my boss value what I do? You're never going to feel secure in your job. You're going to have anxiety and you're going to feel alienated, and then that cycle will continue. So the biggest factor is trust. Trust is key. You need to involve employees in the decision-making process. You need to create flexible work schedules and institute employee development and enhancement programs. Foster trust, and which results in employees more likely wanting to stay, right? They're going to feel less alienated and have increased job satisfaction, which benefits both the employer and the employee. Another way that a person may lack job satisfaction is through burnout, which is the depletion of a person's energy and motivation, loss of occupational idealism, and the feeling of being exploited. It definitely results in stress, and is most common among those in helping professions. I can tell you, after doing my job for 20 years, working in various settings from outpatient to the hospital, definitely have burnout. The repetitiveness, the pressure of having to help people all the time, feeling the responsibility for people's care, doing physical labor. I actually lift and transfer and help people that way. It can burn out on your body and your psyche. Burnout is most common among people in health professions such as police, healthcare professionals. They just really need that support. You need to really keep yourself healthy, like we talked about that healthy aging, because you are going to take the burden of your patients, your clients on you. You're going to have to listen and take a lot of disgruntled people. People are irritated, angry when you're sick. You're their helpline. Having to do that day in and day out can really wear on your psyche. Having a good attitude, having good physical health, and having that life-work balance is key to prevent that burnout. Another thing, there's a tendency of companies to keep fewer employees during times of economic uncertainty. And of course, that adds to the workload for the people on the job, right? So increasing the risk of burnout. So as they let go of more employees and you have more work, you're just feeling the pressure of stress of that extra work, along with the stress of, am I next? Are they going to get rid of me next? Why do you think helping professions have such a high burnout rate? Anything else besides what I asked? Think about it as you go into your career so that you can avoid some of those pitfalls. Not all workers in a profession experience burnout, right? They may be related to the different types of passion one has for the job, right? R.J. Vallerland proposes that the difference relates to people's feeling different types of passions, obsessive and harmonious towards their jobs. A passion is a strong inclination toward an activity that individuals like or even love, and they value and thus find important, in which they invest their time and energy, right? So if you're passionate about your job, you're probably going to have less burnout, right? It's not going to seem like a job. You're going to never feel like you're working if you're that passionate and have that love. The passion model proposes that people develop a passion toward enjoyable activities and they incorporate that into their identity. So their work becomes their identity because again, they love their job, so it doesn't feel like work. So think about it. You've got burnout and you've got their passion. People in the professions that have burnout, they have to deal with other people's complex problems, difficult time constraints, dealing with pressures of every day, along with handling bureaucratic paperwork. May become too much, right? Frustration builds and disillusionment and exhaustion sets in. Burnout can negatively affect the people who are supposed to receive services from the burned out employee, right? So how do you keep that passion that you had for your job and prevent that burnout? Because you don't want your patients or your clients to feel that. That's the question that a lot of employees and employers are answering. So let's talk about Vanderland's model of passion. And what does that mean? So Valorant's model differentiates between two kinds of passion. obsessive and harmonious. So remember, passion is a strong inclination toward an activity that individuals like or love, that they value, in which they invest time and energy. So obsessive passion makes it hard to not think about the activity, therefore disrupting other areas in a person's life. So if you're so obsessive and you're so directly passionate about one thing, you can't have that good work-life balance, right? You need to spread out your love, right? You cannot obsessively do one task because other things will suffer for it. A harmonious passion results when a person feels free, not pressured to perform the activity. So then you have that ability to express yourself and get things done in the correct amount of freedom. Research in France and Canada indicates that the passion model accurately predicts employees' feeling of burnout. Obsessive passion predicts higher levels of conflict, which in turn predict higher levels of burnout. In contrast, harmonious passion predicts higher levels of satisfaction at work, which in turn predicts lower levels of burnout. The best ways to lower burnout are through intervention programs that focus on both the organization and the employee, right? So we've got to find that harmonious passion in our work. Now, how do they do that? For employees, using stress reduction techniques, lowering other people's expectations, incorporating cognitive restructuring of the work situation, and finding alternative ways to enhance personal growth and identity are most effective. So you can think about like employers can promote their employees stress relief days, yoga activity, cognitive restructuring, so they have input into the system to make it harmonious work environment. The employee's job is to lessen the burnout so they can have more productive and happily satisfied employees. So this figure is the path of analytic model of the relationships among passion, satisfaction at work, conflict, and burnout. Harmonious passion predicts higher levels of satisfaction at work, which predicts lower levels of burnout. In contrast, obsessive passion predicts higher levels of conflict, which in turn predict higher levels of burnout. So you can see that with that obsessive passion, you're going to have more conflict, more burnout, less satisfaction at work. We are now going to move on to gender, ethnicity, and discrimination issues. Some of the learning objectives are: how do gender and ethnicity factor into the occupations people choose and how their careers subsequently develop? What types of biases and discrimination hinder the occupational development of women and ethnic minorities? Now we're going to talk about women in the labor force. About 58% of all women over 16 in the United States participate in the labor force, and they represent roughly 47% of the total workforce. Across ethnic groups, African American women participate the most, about 60%, and Latina American women are the least likely to be employed, about 56%. If women represent such a large part of the workforce, why are there so many differences in occupational selection, right? So in the past, women chose traditional female-dominated occupations, secretarial work, teaching, etc. They weren't scientists, very few, right? They weren't considered for roles in management or leadership. Why is that? Most women worked, stayed at home, right? So different views and different values back then. Now most parent households, both the male and the female work, right? Most of the mom and dad work. It's a different outlook. So let's look at some of those barriers that remain for women who seek employment. In the past, women employed outside the home were likely to enter traditional female-dominated occupations like we talked about. This was due mainly to their socialization into these occupational tracks. However, as more women enter the workforce and there's new opportunities are open for women, a growing number have begun to work in occupations that have traditionally been male-dominated, right? We're looking at construction, engineering, science. I remember when I was coming out of college, if you were a female and you wanted to enter engineering, you were almost guaranteed a full ride scholarship because they just wanted to get women into those fields. Is it the same now? I don't know. What does it look like when you guys are in your classes? Who is represented in your science classes? Are you still seeing that male dominant, or is there more female? Something to think about. Non-traditional women occupations are those that have 25% or less of women employed. So think of some other non-traditional. Electrician, plumbers, carpenters. They still have the lowest participation rates of women. So this is just a graph of women's labor force participation rates in selected countries from 1970 to 2012. And it's just showing the gender differences in occupational selection. So you can see from the 70s up into the 2000s, the difference between countries, with Italy being the lowest and Sweden and Canada being the highest. This graph goes on to show the employment of women by industry in 2011. So you can see it shows women as percent of total employed in selected occupations. So look at that. 95.2% of speech language pathologists are women. And I can honestly say I have worked 20 years in the medical profession. I have never seen a male speech language pathologist in the hospital, at least. So that might be pretty accurate. Elementary, middle school teachers, 81%. Social workers, tailors, dressers, 77. Let's look at what the lowest one. Aircraft pilots and flight engineers, only 4%. Firefighters, 4%. Lawyers, 31%. Retail salespersons, 50%. So you can see the towards the bottom are more traditionally thought as male occupations, and up towards the top are traditionally thought of more women. But they're bridging that gap. It's getting better. Women who choose non-traditional occupations are viewed more negatively than their male colleagues. Despite the efforts to counteract gender stereotyping of occupations, women who choose non-traditional occupations and are as successful in them tend to be viewed negatively compared with similarly successful men. Why do you think that it's taken such a long time for women to be accepted into these non-traditional occupations? How do you think you would feel as the only woman and maybe only minority woman working with men and maybe even non-minority men? Think about what we've learned in this chapter so far. Do you think you would be able to have job satisfaction, a successful mentor that would lead to successful career development? Or would you feel alienated and have a higher burnout rate? Knowing what we know now and what we've learned from this chapter, it takes a lot to be successful, and they have many things stacked against them. Another thing, in patriarchal societies, that means one led by men, both women and men have higher respectability ratings to males than to females in the same occupation. In the United States, research shows that men still prefer to date women who are in traditional careers. In addition, compared with women who work in traditional occupations, women who work in non-traditional occupations, say that you're a plumber, are less likely to believe that they are being sexually harassed when confronted with the same behavior. Do you agree with these statistics? Do you think it depends on the work environment of the company? Have you seen any of this? These are broad statements, and a lot of times it can change in the work culture from individual companies. Something to think about. In the 21st century, women can be entrepreneurs and work from home, right? Definitely differences between generational, existing between women's occupations. Did your mom stay at home? Did your mom work outside the home? Did your grandmother? In the 21st century, women entrepreneurs are starting small businesses at a faster rate than men and are finding that a home-based business can solve many of the challenges they face in balancing employment and home life, right? That home-to-life balance. As the millennial generation heads into the workforce, it'll be interesting to see whether their high degree of technological sophistication will provide still more occupational and career options. Technology-mediated workplaces may provide solutions to many traditional issues, right? Work-family conflict, childcare, They're going to come with the solutions that maybe the generations before didn't have. But when millennial generation women choose non-traditional occupations, their attitudes towards those jobs are more similar to them the different from previous generation attitudes. So what home businesses do you think of that started this from women? I can think of Avon, Tupperware, and now we have everything from nutrition, skincare, nails, home-based women businesses that women can do at home and balance that work family, right? What other things can you think of are home-based businesses women thrive at? What kind of technology do you think helps them do this? And what kind of future technology do you think will even make this better? So women leave their jobs for two main reasons. Other than family obligations, they leave it for organizations that idolize and reward masculine values of working, which are way different than women, right? We learn that women are social creatures. They value communication, where men are more doers and more physical, right? So if that is idolized in the workplace, women may feel that their relationships aren't valued, and they may quit their jobs. Since women prefer organizations that value relationships, interdependence, and collaboration, they may feel disconnected from the workplace, right? So in the corporate world, unsupportive or insensitive work environments, organizational politics, and the lack of occupational development opportunities may not be there for women working full time. By mid-career, women may conclude that they must leave these unsupportive organizations to achieve satisfaction, growth, and development at work. Right? That job satisfaction we were talking about. They may feel alienated. They may have burnout, right? They want to be rewarded for their relational skills that they consider essential for success. But this is a controversial topic. Should they be conformed to fit these, should workplaces be conformed to fit these ideals? Can we find some kind of happy medium? Such barriers are a major reason women's workforce participation is discontinuous. Because they cannot find affordable and dependable childcare, or because they choose to take on this responsibility, many women stay home while their children are young. Discontinuous participation makes it difficult to maintain an upward trajectory in one's career through promotion and in terms of maintaining skill, right? So if women are taking time off to have babies and stay at home, but men are still on that corporate ladder, when they come back, they may see that men that were at their same level are way ahead, and things may have changed. More skills may be needed. The corporate atmosphere may change. They may be felt left behind. Do you think women are punished for staying home with children during the prime working years? Is this changing because of stereotypes? Is it changing because the roles are being more shared, that more men and women are sharing childcare responsibilities? That men actually get time off when the baby is born. They actually get paid from the government, FMLA. What do you guys think? I know I had a therapist that took 13 years off to have her children and came back. Granted, she always had a job and stuff, but did she miss those years in terms of her career? It's something to think about. Let's talk about ethnicity and occupational development. Little research has been done on this topic. Why do you think that? With what little research has been done, they found that when an organization is responsive to the needs of minorities, these employees report more positive feelings. Makes sense, right? If someone's listening to your needs and recognizing your differences and actually supporting that, you're going to feel better in the environment. They actually did a study in the Netherlands looking at ethnic minority groups, and they found that ethnic minority employees of a diverse organization reported having more positive feelings about their workplace when they perceive their organizations as responsive and communicative in supportive ways. Yet still more needs to be accomplished for all ethnic groups to have equivalent opportunities. More research needs to be done to determine what ways would best offer this occupational development. So let's go on into bias and discrimination. So why do you think there are so few women at the top? Politicians, CEOs, etc. Let's talk a little bit about this century, right? By the end of the first decade of the 21st century, women accounted for more than half of all people employed in management, professional, and related occupations. However, women are still underrepresented at the very top. Why do you think that? Well, one is gender discrimination, the denying of a job to someone based solely on the basis of gender. Strict job performance standards for women, a different standard for women maybe than for men, a glass ceiling, a level to which women may rise in an organization but can't go beyond. They kind of limit how far they can go in the organization. Um, with that glass ceiling, it's pervasive across higher management and professional workplace settings. You may have a board of all men, and they just cannot perceive a woman in that role. So they'll never get past it. And the limitation to women's careers around the world. So let's look at the research. In the United States and Britain, it confirms that women are forced to work harder than men. Neither differences in job characteristics nor family obligations account for this difference. The results clearly point to stricter job performance standards being applied to women. And one of the greatest barriers facing the women is the boundary between lower tier and upper tier jobs. Men are largely blind to the existence of the glass ceiling because they don't have to go through it, right? Because there is no ceiling for them. Women sometimes are perceived in the corporate world. It is changing. There are more CEOs, women CEOs and stuff, but still, it takes a long time to break these stereotypes. So despite decades of attention to the issue, little overall progress is being made. That was in 2013. The glass ceiling has also been used to account for why African Americans and Asian Americans do not advance much in their careers, as do European American men. It also provides a framework for understanding limitation to women's careers in many countries around the world, such as South Africa. Why do you guys think that this glass ceiling has lasted for so long? Do you think it's better? Do you think that, what companies do you think that have CEOs of women? Look it up, Google. See how many CEOs of the big companies are women. Think of your politicians, your leaders. How much have we grown since 20 years ago? How much more growing do we need? Things to think about. So not only is there the glass ceiling, there's called the glass cliff, a situation where a woman's leadership position is precarious, usually done at times of crisis. So what that means is that in a time of crisis when they just need leadership or a workforce, they'll look to women. Maybe think back in the 40s when they needed women workers, right? A different trend emerges when we examine who is appointed to critical positions in organizations in times of crisis. Research shows that at such times, women are more likely to be put in leadership positions. Consequently, women often confront a glass cliff, the situation in which their leadership position is precarious. Do they get to keep it after the crisis is over? An example of this is shown when companies are more likely to appoint a woman to their board of directors if their financial performance has been poor in the recent past. Women are more likely to be political candidates if their seat is a highly contested one. This is evidence indicates that women's opportunities for high-level leadership in organizations are different than men's. It's based on the circumstances, right? It's not a given. If the environment changes, the circumstances change, maybe that position's not offered to a woman anymore. But it's always offered to a man. That makes it much more riskier. So how can the glass ceiling and cliff be eliminated? Well, women must take action to be assertive and rising to their rightful place in an organization, right? They need to show the skills, and they need to be assertive in telling management of their skills. Women should negotiate salary more effective, and companies can measure productivity in different ways, right? It's not always what we think of traditional successes. Think about the controversial discussion that's been going on the last recent years on equal pay for equal job, right? The Women's Act. Big thing right now is why do women get paid less working the same job as men? It's a question, right? In your book, they talk about Sheryl Sandberg. And she wrote a book called Women, Work, and the Will to Lead in 2013. She set off a very fierce debate. She claimed that there is discrimination against women in the corporate world, but she also argued that an important reason women do not rise to the top more often is due to their unintentional behavior that holds them back, right? She claimed that women do not speak up enough, need to abandon the myth of having it all, must set boundaries, and they need to get a mentor and not check out of work when thinking about starting a family. What do you think about this? Do women self-sabotage themselves? Do they not have the skills that men have been taught to succeed in the corporate world? Something to think about. I know me personally, I know I've never been taught to aggressively ask for a salary, to aggressively ask for what I'm worth. Think about this as you enter and work in the corporate world. The national debate has raised many issues such as the ability to afford childcare and having a partner with whom to share household chores and child rearing. It is clear that this is a hot topic and that resolution of it will likely take years. And then we talked about pay discrimination. It remains a barrier for most women. What do you guys think of this? So, women CEOs, such as Mary Barrera, pictured here, tend to come into their positions during times of crisis, such as what confronted General Motors during the vehicle recalls. We're going to go on to bias and discrimination some more. So, we're going to look at whether or not an action is considered sexual harassment. Depends on the situation, people involved, and the setting. 40 to 50% of women in the European Union experience workplace sexual harassment. 30 to 40% of women in Asian Pacific countries experience workplace sexual harassment. Gender awareness training can help keep a work environment free from harassment. Why do you think that? So we have these statistics, but do you think all women report sexual harassment? How many times have you felt that? Maybe that wasn't an appropriate behavior. I know at the hospital we take very explicit sexual harassment training every year to prevent it. With videos of examples with actors so that we can see exactly the behavior and have no questions. This type of training can help work environments free from harassment where the fine line of is it just being inappropriate and when does it become harassment? So thing to think about. Another form of bias and discrimination is age discrimination. Is denying a job or promotion based solely on one's age. This particularly affects middle-aged people. There are laws that exist that states that workers must be hired for their ability, not their age. And discrimination is often covert. It's under different guises. Mental or physical based tasks may be component of some evaluations. So maybe they make something very difficult or technological so that the older person may not understand it. And retirement incentives may be used in attempts to get rid of older workers. I know my dad worked for the fire department, and at 50, they entice them to retire. So why do you think this? Older workers are more expensive. They are less likely to learn new technology, and they tend to cost the company a lot of money. Newer workers are less expensive, they're more technologically savvy, and they're less likely to stay for the whole duration of their career. So a lot of times that age discrimination is popping up more and more. So these practices of age discrimination may save companies money in the short run, but the loss of expertise and knowledge comes at a high price. Indeed, an emerging model of employment is boomerang employees, individuals who terminate employment at one time but return to work in the same organization at a future time. Boomerang employees sometimes return as employees on the company's payroll, but increasingly are returning as contract workers who are not eligible for benefits, therefore meeting the company's needs for both expertise and lower costs. That's one solution. We're going to now move on to occupational transitions. Our learning objectives. Why do people change occupations? Is worrying about potential job loss a major source of stress? How does job loss affect the amount of stress experienced? We're going to go over how these stressful things during these occupational transitions. We're now going to discuss occupational transitions. As we talked about early, earlier, we don't stay in the same occupation for the rest of our lives, like maybe our grandparents or parents. Occupational changes have become part of the modern career process. Corporations have restructured so often that employees now assume occupational changes are part of the career process. Such corporate actions means that people's conceptions of work and career are in flux. They're always changing. And that losing a job is no longer has only negative meanings. Um, Even in today's society, can we think of some things that are why people lose their jobs? I know recently with the minimum wage increase, I've gone to some restaurants where they have told us that they've had to let go of staff because they can't afford to keep staff on or change their menu or change prices. That's just one example. Can you think of some more? Several factors have been identified as important to determine who will remain in the occupation and who will change. Some factors such as whether the person likes the occupation. So think about it. If you really like your occupation, you're more likely to have self-initiated learning skills. You may adapt better and be one that's going to stay with the company, opposed to the person who doesn't really like their job, not self-motivated, and not performing well. Other factors, such as obsolete skills and economic trends, may force occupational changes. Right? Obsolete skills and economic trends force people out of their jobs. One of that is the decline. Example is the decline in the U.S. auto industry. What happened there is that with increased technology, the use of robots took over the jobs that people used to do. And with that, we as a consumer had less expensive cars, but there saw a lot of employees laid off because their skill wasn't needed. Another reason people lose their jobs is because corporations send jobs overseas to increase profits. How many of you, the items in your home or clothes that you wear say made in China, made in Taiwan, right? But we need to ask the question, do they have the same fair practices, same job protection as Americans? Is it worth it to have those cheaper items? And not too long ago, they had a slogan here, "Buy American," to keep jobs for our people in America. So the economic recession also will usually result in large-scale layoffs and high levels of unemployment. Right now, we're in the midst of that. Just today, I saw that there are 70,000 unemployment claims because of the coronavirus. What do you think the outlook is for employment? Is this just a temporary? Something to think about as we're going forward. We're now going to go and move on to what happens when we need to retrain workers. When the skills become obsolete and they need to learn new skills, right? So what that means is skills needed to perform a particular job usually change over time. So these workers need to have new skills learned. Unless a person's skills are kept up to date, the outcome is likely to be either job loss or career plateau. Career plateauing occurs when there is a lack of challenge in the job or promotional opportunity in the organization, or when a person decides not to seek advancement. So a little bit like we talked about earlier, just that self-initiation, that learning to grow and adapt your skills to the ever-changing work environment, be it technology, be it what's needed in that company at that time, even if it's not your particular skill set, it's being able to change to meeting the needs of that company. Research in Canada and Australia show that believing one's career has plateaued usually results in less organizational commitment, lower job satisfaction, and a greater tendency to leave. But attitudes can remain positive if it is only the lack of challenge and not a lack of promotion opportunity that is responsible for plateauing. So as long as you're, it's not that lack of challenge, that you're still being challenged, then you can still have advancement in your career. So some things that happen because of career plateauing, right? It results in, we talked about lower job satisfaction and commitment. Retraining programs can help people advance in their occupation or find a new one. And lifelong learning is a necessity, right? So we always need to be aware of learning new skills. Things change. I know in healthcare, the way we do stuff 20 years ago to what we do now is different. Much more evidence-based. Things are much more based in research and theory. So always being up to date and being a lifelong learner is essential. to have success in your career and to avoid that career plateauing, right? People are having second, third careers. Do you think this is by choice or necessity? If you do not continue to learn, will you lose your job? Different attitudes and competency expectations now in this ever-changing technological age. Can you survive it, or are you going to be able to adapt? As we move on to occupational insecurity, I want you to think about those programs we talked about earlier. Those retraining programs, which help improve people's chances of advancing in their chosen occupation. They can assist people in making successful transitions from one occupation to another. It's supported through research, and it's supported through history. And it shows that innovations change the nature of work. Retraining workers help companies keep up and society to reduce poverty. So without these programs and without those skills to change in your job setting, you may have occupational insecurity. Many people today feel insecure about their jobs due to the economic downturns. And if you don't have the skills to adapt, you may be let go. It results in stress and poor psychological and physical well-being. Why do you think people feel insecure about their jobs? What has changed in the last 50 years? All those things that we talked about earlier, right? Technology changing, robots taking over jobs for people, minimum wage, how much does it cost for an employer to run their business? Think of all the small businesses. All those costs have to go to the employer. All those things change with the environment. So if you're feeling stressed out, you're more likely to have job insecurity, resulting in the same levels of stress regardless of whether or not the insecurity really exists. What that means is that just by feeling like your job is not secure, you're going to have those feelings whether or not that job is really secure. Maybe it is secure and you just have that very what if scenario. Over the past few decades, changing U.S. economic conditions, the move toward a global economy, changing demographics, and a global recession have forced many people out of their jobs. Heavy manufacturing and support businesses, the steel, oil, and automotive industries are great examples of those lot of loss of business and the way we change the way we do things, right? Much more environmentally friendly, trying to use less oil, robots, technology. So no one really is immune. The Great Recession of the late 2000s and early 2010s resulted in many middle and upper level employees worldwide losing their jobs. People that thought that they would never lose their jobs. So economic downturns create significant levels of stress, especially when such downturns create massive job loss. Because if massive industries are laying off, where do you think you're going to go get a new job? If your sister company down the road is laying off a bunch of people, where do you go with the skill set you have? So they found that people can cope in different ways. People who use emotion-focused coping rather than problem-focused coping have higher levels of stress. So what's the difference? People's anxiety about their job may result in negative attitudes about their employer or even about work in general, which may in turn result in diminished desire to be successful. It's a downward cycle, right? Sometimes what these people think is true about their work situation is more important than what is actually the case. Just the possibility of losing one's job can negatively affect physical and psychological health. People believe that their job is in jeopardy even if it's not, show levels of stress, similar to those of unemployed participants. So when you think about these coping strategies, you want to think about if you're using your emotion-focused coping, you're gonna be more stressful because you're gonna just think of the emotional side of it. You look at it whether it's rational or not, all the things that can happen, instead of looking at the problem and saying, okay, I have this problem. How do I fix it? I'm going to look at it analytical. I'm going to do the steps that I need to fix it. I'm going to look at it as positive. So I'm going to actually give myself solutions instead of just responding to it emotionally. Those people who look at a problem and want to solve it have much less stress. People who deal with it with their emotions think of all the what ifs. What if I can't find a job? What if I never get paid? What if I can't eat? I found in my job and with my patients, if you think and strive toward positive outcomes, you're more likely to achieve or to get close to those outcomes. And at the very least, you're not as stressed about the process, and that decreases your anxiety. Those that have already determined all the things that can go wrong will probably be stressed and always looking at that failure instead of the success, even in the small successes that may happen, and will most likely have poor outcomes. So what happens when you do lose your job? Coping with unemployment. Unemployment can have long-lasting personal impact, right? What would you do if you lost your job after 10, 15, 20, even 30 years of working? Is your identity and your self-worth tied to your job, or are they independent? When unemployment lasts and reemployment does not occur soon, unemployed people commonly experience a variety of negative effects, right? That range from a decline in immune system functioning to a decrease in well-being. If your self-worth or your identity is tied to your work and you can't work, a lot of times you become depressed because that's what you value. My grandparents were very much like that. You were valued by what you could do, what you could provide for your family, and what work you could do. So if you couldn't do that, you would feel pretty useless and hopeless. So they found that it's one of the things of unemployment can significantly lower mental health, life satisfaction, and marital satisfaction. If you're not working, you're going to have a lot of arguments at home, right? Gender and age differences exist, mainly due to financial obligations and family responsibilities. So our roles in the family are different. Whoever's making the most money may find that extra stress, who has to take care of the kids. All those things come into play. Ethnic minorities experience greater unemployment rates, and length of unemployment matters, right? So if it's just only a few weeks, you can get over that. But if it's months and months and you're having very difficulty finding a job, that can lead to long-term depression. The effects of job loss vary with age and gender. In the United States, middle-aged men are more vulnerable to negative effects than older or younger men, largely because they have greater financial responsibilities than the other two groups. But older women report more negative effects over time than younger women. Financial pressures are often more severe for women who are single mothers. Can you imagine? You have to take care of your whole family, right? And then job opportunities may not be as fruitful for you out there, and you may probably make less money. The higher one's education level, the less stress one typically feels immediately after losing a job. And that's probably because higher education levels usually result in faster reemployment, right? You're more likely to get a job if you're skilled and have employment, opposed to those that work in non-skilled jobs. Many factors from the environment, biological to psychological life forces, can affect how we cope with unemployment, right? How we're biologically, do we deal with things well? Do we cope well? Do we have that oxytocin, right? Our psychological, are we extroverts, introverts, positive, negative thinkers? And how our environment, how we were taught to view work, right? Like I said earlier, my family grew up thinking that there was value in work. So what kind of environment did you grow up? What does work play in the importance of your self-worth? Cultural differences need to be considered in understanding the effects of unemployment. Compared to European Americans, it usually takes minority workers longer to find jobs, right? How long are you unemployed also affects how people react. People who are unemployed for at least a year perceive their mental health significantly more negatively than either employed people or those who have removed themselves from the labor force. Those who lose their jobs involuntarily, you're going to feel a loss of control over the work environment. If you didn't choose it, you don't know if you're going to be able to get it back. You feel less demand placed on them. Importantly, a reasonable amount of demand is critical to maintaining good health, whereas too little demand lowers health. So you need to have some demand on you for your work capabilities, but not too much, so that balance, so that you can stay in your job. And even if you're not in your job, you still need to have something that's worthwhile for you to do to stay healthy. So how do we continue to cope with unemployment? So the advice for managing occupational transitions. So how do we approach job loss is important. We want to approach job loss with a healthy sense of urgency. You want to go out and seek those jobs, find those jobs, feel like you're taking control of the situation instead of thinking the situation's taking control over you. You want to consider your next career move and what must be done to achieve it. It might be time to go back to school or learn a new skill, maybe something you've been wanting to do anyways. Evaluate and see where you want to go. What do you need to do to get another job? And you want to acknowledge and react to change as soon as it is evident. You don't want to wallow in it. You want to be ahead of the curve. You want to be up on the technology, up on the change, so that you can be proactive in finding these jobs. There are services that help, such as LinkedIn. They give job seekers more sense of control. You can put your resume out there, right? Lots of different places where you can get the word out so that employers don't have to seek you. You can seek employers, right? So you want to always be doing these things to be proactively finding a new job. Instead of, you will definitely make that transition much easier. We're now going to transition to the work and family balance. So let's think about the learning objectives for this section. What are the issues faced by employed people? Who will care for your dependents, your children, or your older parents? How do partners typically view the division of household chores? Is it equal, even if you both work? What is work-family conflict, and how does it affect couples' lives? We're going to be looking at that on the next slides. So we're going to begin with the dependent care dilemma. So most middle-aged, older young adults, they're going to be starting families. And most are going to have two family incomes. So what does that create for the family dynamics? So they found that 2/3 of mothers with children under 6 are in the labor force. And these surveys of mothers with preschool children reveal that the motivation for returning to work tends to be related to financial need and how attached mothers are to their work. The amount of time a woman leaves has matters. The passage of the Family and Medical Leave Act in 1993 entitled workers to take unpaid time off to care for their dependents with the right to return to their jobs. This act resulted in an increase in the number of women who return to work at least part-time. A concern for many of these women is whether stepping out of their occupation is going to affect their job, right? So we look at that family and medical leave. That's in 1993. So that's not too long ago, about 25 years. Before that, can you imagine not being able to have the time to go stay with your children? And like I mentioned earlier, they have actually, fathers can take up to 6 weeks off paid through the FMLA. Or if you have a family member that you have to take care of that's sick, you can also do that. So that's resulted in a lot more fathers taking time off, either at the same time as the mother or later on, so the actual father can have their bonding time within the first year. And they felt like one of the things that taking a leave after childbirth would cause negative consequences for career advancement. Are you going to miss out? How much time would you have to take out to miss out? Is 3 months gonna derail your career? So a lot of women are thinking that. They found that even for short leaves, women in the United States are punished. But even in women-friendly countries such as Sweden, long leaves typically result in negative effect on upward career movement. So it just feels like if no matter how much time you take off, you are going to have to work to get yourself back up on that career ladder. And if affordable and quality care, elder care is not available, women may drop out of the workforce. So typically, if both parents are working, it's the woman who drops out of the workforce. Do you think that's the same these days? Do you decide it on who's making the most money, who has the most flexible career? Questions that we can ask, right? Another often overlooked is the increasing number of workers who must also care for a parent or partner, right? So that this doesn't, dependent care isn't just your children. It could be your family member that's sick or your elderly parent. And most of these are the women taking off caring for their parents or parents-in-laws. More than 80% provide an average of 23 hours per week of care, and 70% contribute money. That's a lot. Depending on the individual's economic situation, it may not be possible to find that affordable and quality care, right, that is needed. And like I said, there may be no option but to drop out of the workforce or enlist help of family and friends. So the question is, would you work if you didn't have to? Would you want to stay home with your children if you could? Or is your identity tied to your work? What is your ideal work to family ratio? So with this dependent care dilemma, you're going to have the caregiver, if you're taking care of your elderly parent or your children all the time, right? Caregivers report negative consequences regarding career advancement and stress levels. For example, whether responsible for the care of an older parent or a child, women and men report negative effects on their work, higher levels of stress, and problems with coping. Could you imagine if you were working and you had to take care of your elderly patient, maybe, your parent, maybe they have dementia, and your 6-year-old child at the same time? And then the stresses of staying on top of your work. Tend to have a lot of stressful situations, and depending on how people cope with it, will definitely affect the family dynamic, especially if you're employed full time. Subsequent research shows that besides having higher stress levels, fast forward families, those are the ones that have to take care of their parents as well, also deal with impacts on career advancement and physical and mental health consequences of lifestyle. As more men choose to stay home following the birth of children, the negative effects on their careers tend to mirror those long established with women. So it's not only just women and men, it's the actual time away from the career, regardless of what gender you are. When women's partners provide good support and women have average or high control over their jobs, employed mothers are significantly less distressed than employed non-mothers or mothers without support. Research focusing on single working mothers also shows that those who have support from their families manage to figure out a balance between work and family obligations. So the key is the support, right? If partners are supportive and women have high control over their jobs and single mothers have support, then these negative effects can be lessened. Regardless of your ethnicity, where you work, if you have good support, you're less likely actually to have negative effects. Another problem with the dependent care dilemma is backup care. What do you do when when your child's sick or you need someone to help you with that, your elderly patient? Backup care is emergency care for dependents so that the employee does not need to lose a day of work. So results are mixed on whether or not employees at companies with backup care are better off, but they are important for companies to allow employees to leave work early to care for family needs without penalties, right? If you're reassured that you won't lose your job or have get in trouble for leaving, you're much more be able to cope with this better. So, does providing a workplace care center or backup care make a difference in terms of an employee's feeling about work, absenteeism, and productivity? There just isn't a simple answer. So the example they give in your book is making a child care center available to employees does not necessarily reduce parents' work-family conflict or their absenteeism, particularly among younger employees. A family-friendly company must also pay attention to the attitudes of their employees and make sure that the company provides broad-based support. The most important single thing a company can do is allow the employee to leave work without penalty to tune to a family needs. Research in Korea confirms that having a family-friendly supervisor matters because a large percentage of employed mothers rely on family members for childcare. What appears to make a difference is whether corporate policy matches with people's childcare arrangements. So more in tune to not whether they have a facility available, but whether they listen to the needs of their employees and let them go when their family emergencies happen and not feel pressured to work when they have to have increased stressors or need help with dependent care at home. So now we're going to move on to that family dynamic, juggling multiple roles. How do dual earning couples divide household chores? Right? When both members of a heterosexual couple with dependents are employed, who cleans the house, cooks the meals, and takes care of the children when they are ill? This question goes way, way back, right? I know growing up, it was my mom. My dad worked. My mom stayed at home. My grandmother did that. Now it's different, right? Most families are two incomes. How do you divvy up those chores? This question goes to the heart and core of a dilemma of dual earner couples. How are household chores divided? How are work and family rule conflicts handled? So women spend more time on chores. That's determined. But men have increased the amount of time they spend on housework. But they usually only on weekends and only on tasks they find agreeable. So it's like women are expected to do the chores, but men will help if they the ones that they want to do, and mostly on weekends. Ethnic differences in the division of household labor is also apparent. In Mexican American families with husbands born in Mexico, men help more when family income is lower and their wives contribute a proportionately higher share of the household income. Comparisons of Latino American, African American, and European American men consistently show that European American men help with chores less than Latino American or African American men. So the unequal division of labor causes the most arguments and the most unhappiness for dual earner couples. So household chores is one of the biggest things that families argue about. Women have reduced the amount of time they spend on housework, especially when they are employed, right? And men have increased the amount of time they spend on such tasks. The increased participation of men in these tasks is not all that it seems, right? Most of these, like we said, they work on the weekends, they involve specific tasks they agree on, are largely unrelated to women's employment status. In short, increase in men's participation has not done much to lower women's burdens around the house. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on that and your future or your current work-family ratio? So now let's look at a graph that shows the mean housework hours across the globe. So we see that Ireland has women working the most, 10 to men's 4. And right behind it is in Greece, where women work 8 hours to men's 1.5. I believe the best countries is France. France for closer to a ratio of about 5 to 2. And in the Ukraine, men work about 5 hours to women's 9. So just a good graph to see across the global housework division. So that work-family conflict, we've talked about it, right? It's the feeling of being pulled in multiple directions by incompatible demands from job and family. How do you balance the demands from your work and the demands from your family, be it your children, your husband, your parents? How do you do that? Work and family roles influence each other's in complex ways, right? When people both have occupations and children, they must figure out how to balance the demands of each. It is important that partners negotiate agreeable arrangements of household and child care tasks, but truly equitable divisions of labor are clearly the expectation. Most U.S. households with heterosexual dual workers couples still operate under a gender segregated system. There are traditional chores for women and for men. These important tasks must be performed to keep homes safe, clean, and sanitary, and these tasks take time, right? Men may mow the lawn, wash the car, and even cook, but they are much less likely to vacuum, scrub the toilet, or change a baby's diapers. Remember how we talked about stereotypes earlier in the semester? They're still being represented in households, right? Even when both men and women work. Do you guys follow these rules? Do you tend to segregate on typical men and women type chores? Or do you mix it up? And what do you think would have to happen for that to change? So this is just a picture of a typical dual earner couple learning how to grapple with the work and family conflict and balancing job and family demands. Many people believe that in such cases, work and family roles influence each other, right? When things go badly at work, the family suffers. And when there are troubles at home, work suffers. You can't truly separate. They're both part of your identity. Are you good at taking your home stresses and keeping them away from work? How well you manage that might be how well you deal with these stresses. Influence is not the same in each direction. Whether work influences family or vice versa is a complex function of support, resources, type of job, and a host of other issues. One key but often overlooked factor is whether the work schedules of both partners allow them to coordinate activities such as childcare. So I know a lot of families, right? Like maybe one parent works and the other parent watches the kids, and then they switch. One works mornings, one works evenings. How would that deal with the work-family relationship? Childcare is being taken care of, but is the family unit together at one time? Lots of things to think about, and what do you prioritize? So how can men and women have equitable divisions of labor? An important step would be to talk about these issues with your partner, right? If you're keeping an honest line of communication and letting your partner know if something is bothering you, then you're going to resolve these conflicts and teach your children how to resolve these conflicts, and that men and women are equally responsible for household chores. And that will also end the problem. By creating true gender equality without differentiating among household tasks is the only way this unfair division of labor will end. So work-family conflict requires a life stage approach, right? Think about that life stage, like psychological, biological, environmental. Understanding that work-family conflicts require this life stage approach will help you. For example, there are several studies that they have found that the highest conflict between the competing demands of work and family occurs during the peak parenting years, which those years are what, in your 30s or late 20s maybe, when there are at least 2 preschool children in the home. Having 2 kids under 5 is quite a challenge, right? Inter-role conflicts diminish in later in life stages, so timing is everything, right? That's that life stage, especially when the quality of the marriage is high. So if you have support for each other, you've set good communication, and then you have children, the timing matters, right? We think about an 18-year-old, or if you're having children in your 30s. It's that life stage approach. Dual earner couples often have difficulty finding time for each other, right? We talked about that earlier, especially if they both work long hours or they work alternating hours for daycare. The amount of time together is not necessarily the most important. It's the shared activities that they do, such as eating, playing, and conversing. Those couples tend to be happier if they're doing something actually together and not doing separate activities in the same room. Unfortunately, many couples find that by the time they have the opportunity to be alone together, they are too tired to make the most of it. And some of those effects happen all over the world, no matter where you live, right? Can most people in this class relate to that? So as we come to the end of chapter 12, we want to think of that globally, women experience more conflict from competing work and family demands. They tend to have to do more chores. They tend to be more the primary caregiver to their parent and their child. But it is getting better as males do more, taking more of that responsibility. Couples can work together to help mitigate the stress by negotiating schedules around work, commitments to their careers, and spending time together. Just remember that work-family conflict described here is worse for couples in the United States because Americans work more hours and have fewer vacation days compared with other developed countries. Couples can work together to help mitigate this stress, and they can, like I said, negotiate schedules. These negotiations also should include a discussion of joint activities such as meals and family activities. Just remember what we learned about healthy habits at home, right? The family dynamics and setting those healthy patterns. That is key into getting the work-family relationship and work-family balance. The effects of development of children on this work-family balance and how life stressors of the parents can affect that development of children, right? So having a good work-family relationship and balance will in turn affect the development of your children and carry on those traditions. That's the end of chapter 12. I have a study guide for you when we get to the exam. If you have any questions, leave it in the discussion for chapter 12 in the module 10 area. And then next week we'll be moving on to things middle age and through the older adult. All right, see you guys later.